The atmosphere of the tent was incredibly still. Sitting before the table, Fenric's gaze had been fixed on one place for a long moment. It was down to the map he received from the knights about the Forbidden Forest. Fenric was not empty-handed about the Forbidden Forest. He had entered it before. With Presepe. But the problem was elsewhere. The problem was, where is Vidar? Siegfried hinted to him that it was an ancient, passed-down truth that the Demon King lived in the Cave of Silence on the western side of the Forbidden Forest. But Vidar no doubt knows that this is a popular thing. Perhaps he had already fled to another place. The Forbidden Forest was infinitely vast. But what was strange was that a certain certainty swept over Fenric, a certainty that he did not know the reason for. Vidar would be there, in the very Cave of Silence. The face he saw when he stuck his sword under his collarbone. The shock and confusion were clearly evident. This was probably the first real injury he had ever received in his life. Where could he turn to in this situation? It must be a place he knows well and feels safe. Like the Cave of Silence, in which he lived his whole life. As Siegfried said, splitting ranks would be dangerous. Hadn't they been in great danger the last time they did that? On top of that, there are now more monsters than ever before. Dividing forces was never a wise choice. Therefore, his intention was to lead all the forces as a single mass, heading to the Cave of Silence. But Presepe. Fenric clenched his fist until blue veins appeared on his hand. He could still clearly see Precipice's face as she passed through the black fog trying to stop Vidar. And her sad, shaking voice. She looked very emaciated, as if she had suddenly shriveled up. This was not strange. She was forcefully forced to return to this hideous place, without a minimum level of safety. Just as she was in the West Tower of the Imperial Palace. How many times he promised to protect her. But in the end, he did nothing. Not when she was brought back to the tower by Dietrich's orders, nor now that Vidar had kidnapped her. Moreover, Fenric's eyes moved to the book lying next to the map. It was a memory book. The book that only the player can see, and Vidar brought it to life. But Vidar did not realize that this materialized book could also be seen by others, except him and Presepe. Deciphering it was not difficult. Fenric himself heard Vidar say one day in his own tongue, then, Fenric realized for sure. What Vidar has been repeating tirelessly is true, it is completely different from him. He is the hero of the story, unlike him, he is not given any setting within the game. But that no longer made any sense. He didn't care about such things. What was worrying about Fenric now was something else, Presepe's safety. All the male characters in the game, without exception, brutally killed Presepe whenever she went against their mood. He had seen it with his own eyes countless times in repetition cycles. Wouldn't Vidar be like them? Is he also still a prisoner of the programmed values imposed on him? So Fenric was afraid that Presepe was suffering even at this moment. Afraid that he would once again face a reality in which he would be unable to protect her. He was unconsciously caressing something in his hands. A strand of silver hair, perhaps Presepe's, stuck to Ric's paws. Suddenly, little Rick flapped his wings and flew to rest on Fenric's shoulder. Despite knowing full well that he was a monster, Fenric did not kill him. Just because he thought that Alric might be with Presepe. If this is true, it may provide him with a lead that will lead him to her. But the truth is that Fenric, unlike Presepe, did not bear the blood of monsters. Alric had no reason to be kind to him. However, Fenric kept looking at him as he exhaled a heavy sigh. And at that very moment, Alric returned briskly to the table and began tapping the map with his beak. The east? The place that was torn apart under the blows of the Ric's sharp beak was east of the forest, where the road led to Vanessa's village. What are you doing now? Do you want me to go there? Fenric said while laughing sarcastically, as if he did not believe what he was saying. He must have gone completely mad. How could he talk to a creature that was not a human being, but a monster? But Rick suddenly raised his head, then bit down hard on Fenric's sleeve. Then he started flapping his wings violently, as if trying to pull him with him. Naturally, Fenric's heavy body did not move an inch. Fenric stared into Rick's eyes, shining like golden light, and a strange expression crossed his face. Duke Fenric. Kevin appeared calmly. When he saw Rick next to Fenric, a look of surprise appeared on his face. Whatever connection Rick had with Mrs. But Kevin understood. He had seen over and over again how much Presepe meant to Fenric. Therefore, he quickly changed his expression and continued speaking slowly. I have placed Commander Siegfried next to the Emperor. Just in case, if His Majesty moves alone, I have left some knights with him in the village. Siegfried, in turn, has promised to send for us immediately if an emergency occurs. As you mentioned, the day will be more fortunate for us than the night. The number of monsters that invaded the village alone is enormous, which means that what is roaming in the forest is at least twice that. And the darker it gets, the easier it becomes for them to hunt. Now that the night is late, we had better move with the first hint of dawn. I have arranged all the formations, the Duke's privates, the common soldiers, the knights, and even the priests. They cooperated remarkably, perhaps because the Archbishop's death was so devastating. As for the wizards, they seem either terrified or seeing this as a losing battle from the beginning. They are lagging behind. Perhaps it is both. Kevin let out a long sigh. I was afraid they would disturb things, so I put the mages in a position to defend the village as much as possible. Anyway, since the Emperor will be in the village while we go to the Forbidden Forest, that's a good excuse. Duke Fenric? He received no response despite his constant talking, and then Kevin narrowed his eyes and looked carefully at Fenric. Strangely, the Duke seemed lost in thought. He had traveled the battlefield with him many times, but never had Fenric been distracted by something else on the eve of battle. This was the first time he saw him in such a state, so he was a little confused. Then he called out to him more cautiously, Duke Fenric. But what he came back with was no answer. As Fenric rose quietly, Rick chirped vigorously as if he had been waiting for that moment. Foolish behavior. Fenric knew better than anyone that what he was doing was not his own, but very foolish. However, he could not retreat. From the beginning, whenever it came to Presepe, he always turned into a fool, and he never accepted himself from that. Kevin. Fenric put his hand on Kevin's shoulder, then whispered in his ear in a low voice, From now on, listen carefully to what I have to say.